Now, if this looks a little bit familiar, that's because we made a very similar video last week. Last week, Yam and I compared his Husky 501 to the Pan Am, the 1250 adventure bike monster from Harley Davidson. And both of those motorcycles, we said, are apex predators in their category. Today, we're looking at the absolute nadir predators, the prey perhaps. Today, these are the bottom dollar cheapskate entries for people who are trying to get off-road. And I wanted to see how they compare and see if there's anything between those two motorcycles or if there's just as massive a chasm as there was between the Pan Am and the FE501. So today, it is cheap dual sport versus cheap ADV, and we're gonna see how they handle. Now, for those of you who did see that video that came out last week, I highly recommend you check this one out, especially if you're a beginner looking at one of these two bikes in one of these categories, because there are some major differences that you're going to see between these bottom dollar bikes and those top tier motorcycles. There are a lot of features that are missing on these bikes. Perhaps they're not missing, they're just left off to save you some price. There are some surprising features on both of these motorcycles as well, and we are going to dive into specs. But Whitney, we brought you in today because I wanted to see somebody who hasn't ridden a lot of either of these motorcycles. As somebody who hasn't spent a bunch of time on dual sports, you had said that you haven't ridden one like this before.
This is my first full-sized.
Yeah, because we did the MX Factory many moons ago at this point.
On Mini Guys.
On Mini Guys, and then you were goofing around with us on big bikes. So you have a little bit of big bike experience.
I have more big bike experience than I do. I'm really excited to ride this guy.
Yeah, so we're going to get both of these bikes out on the road. In the twisties, we are going to hit up some dirt, and we are going to hit the highway, give you the full gamut of these motorcycles and see how they feel. And I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on the KLR, mostly because it's mine, but also because I genuinely do believe this is a surprising platform, and a lot of people are overlooking it because it's so underpowered, they say. Now, speaking of underpowered, let's talk about the specs and features on each of these motorcycles.
All right, here we have our beginner bike giveaway. This is a Honda CRF300L. Be sure to click the link down below at shop.yammynoob.co. Every dollar you spend is an entry to win. It's powered by a 286cc single cylinder, making 27 horsepower and 19 foot-pounds of torque, which is plenty of power to have fun in the twisties, get it off-road, get it on the highway, but not enough to scare you. So with this modern setup, it does have a 6-speed gearbox, and it's about 313 pounds wet and ready to ride. There's no other features to ride home about, so let's get the KLR here and see what it's packing.
Now, with us checking out cheapskate motorcycles and the CRF coming in at $5,200, I wanted to bring in something that starts at about the same price. Obviously, this is my KLR650 adventure spec package here, which does tip the scales at a little bit over $8,000, but you can get these things down all the way to about $6,000 if you don't get the bags and you don't get all the plugs and stuff up front. You can get these bikes dirt cheap, and that is part of the reason why they brought this machine back, and it's selling so darn well. Now, it is powered by a 652cc thumper that was made in 1987, and full stop, it was made in 1987. Yeah, it has some updates, but it's still making a period correct 40 horsepower and 39 foot-pounds of torque while weighing in at 460 pounds without the bags. This is a heavy motorcycle, but one of the things that I love so much about it is that it is a full-sized bike. It has a similar setup to the CRF with a 21-inch front end, but it has a slightly smaller 17-inch rear wheel. That really helps this feel like the most dirt bikey, the most dual sportiest of the ADV motorcycles. It really does just kind of tractor over stuff. Now, I did say that this thing was from 1987, and the transmission is from 1987 as well. It's a 5-speed gearbox. This thing rattles and shakes. It's a very unimpressive motorcycle to ride because it just works. It's not going to scare you at all. It's going to get you up to highway speed. I have taken this thing halfway across the country and it just works. It's a functional motorcycle. But now I wanted to get both of these bikes back in here and bring Whitney in to give us some idea of how they sit, because For somebody who's a little bit shorter, a little bit nervous about getting into a dual sport or a full-size adventure bike, seat height is something that you have to consider. So let's see how she feels getting on these bikes for the first time. Alrighty, Whitney, go ahead and throw a leg over the KLR and tell the folks at home what it's like mounting up on this barge.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, it's heavy. It's very heavy, actually.
Yeah, these adventure bikes tend to be pretty top heavy, despite the fact that they have big old engines down low. How does the reach to the ground feel?
Non-existent. I'm kind of on a toe. I'm tall too, like I'm 5'8". For a lady, I feel like that's tall. But, you know, you're not supposed to stand, right? As long as you can get a toe down, you're fine.
Yeah, if you can get a toe down, you're all right. But do you feel like you'd be able to pick this motorcycle up by yourself if you were out on
Not
one?
without a professional teaching me how to do so.
Yeah. These things are real heavy. Now, I'd like to get you onto the CRF here.
All right.
To see what you think, because the CRF is much lighter and the suspension doesn't compress nearly as much since it's carrying around a lot less weight. So let's see what you think here.
Ooh, all right. Way easier reach to the ground. Still very tall.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting that like full flat foot down on both, but I'm imagining because it's so much lighter, you are more comfortable like that.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I had an oblique workout when I was trying to just get it upright.
So without having ridden both these bikes, what's your initial take? Which one are you leaning more towards?
Oh, well, this is gonna be way more fun off-road, I feel like.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's get both these motorcycles out on the road. We're gonna get them in the twisties first and see which one handles those corners the best. Alrighty, so we are out on the Twisty Road segment doing the exact opposite of our top shelf motorcycle challenge. We're doing the bottom shelf bargain bin ADV versus dual sport today. And Whitney, I just threw you into the deep end on Lime Creek on the KLR. You have not ridden that.
Here we go. My first corner, I'm like, I'm just gonna park it because what the fuck is going on?
But you rode in on the CRF.
Yeah.
And we are going to swap bikes here in a second, but give me your initial impressions on the KLR through these twisty roads here.
Feels like a big tank, especially going from something as agile and easygoing as the CRF. I'm like, I could barely reach the pegs on this thing. I keep hitting your little highway pegs with your vice grips and your bungee cords. I'm like, what is this thing? Whose brain am I jumping on?
I will say, much like a Sportster, a KLR is a deep reflection upon its owner.
Yeah, I'm like, how do I turn on this thing?
It is an absolute barge, that's for sure. And getting onto this thing, you immediately feel so much weight just disappear. It's comical how light and flickable this is by comparison. It literally feels like I'm riding on a toy.
That definitely has toy essence. I love just jumping on something for the first time and letting the internet just witness I'm like getting me betting straight. But I know by the end of this road, I'll feel like way more comfortable on it, but it is very different to maneuver. It's also been a hot minute since I've been on an ADV bike. So the whole front end and the whole steering is way different.
Yeah, so the main difference you're feeling there between the ADV bikes that you've ridden in the past is that one actually has that 21-inch front end and it's got a super spindly rear tire. So it's a lot more dual sport oriented as far as ADV bikes go.
Okay.
It is very much a purposeful.
The gearing is just so different. I can't get over that.
Yeah, so that's a 5-speed box in there.
Okay.
It doesn't have a 6th gear, so the gearing is quite different. Also, are you feeling how ancient that motor is?
I am, and I can feel all the times I accidentally go into neutral.
Yeah, that's down to the way that I have it set up. You really got to yank that shifter. by comparison, you know, the little 286 single on this, I do miss how much torque I get out of the KLR. This engine it's a lot more zingy than other dual sports. It's not as torquey down low as something like a DRZ 400. You really got to work this engine to get it to do stuff. Whereas the KLR, you can kind of just set it and forget it and let the torque work. I mean, it'll chatter away underneath you, it being like, you know, you really should have shifted down there, but it will torque out of just about any corner you put it in. That is just going to come down to the massive difference in displacement. But I can't get over how light and flickable this thing is. I'm really I'm really interested to hear what you have to say when you get back on this motorcycle. So
I'm gonna cry tears of joy.
Yeah, why don't we pull over here at the next exit and have you hop back on this so we can get your impressions on the dual sport in a twisty road. Now hopping aboard the humble CRF, how you feeling?
I feel like $1,000,000, man. I feel like all the dad weight has shaved off of my belly, and I feel lighter and freer and less depressed.
Yeah, there is something to be said about a dual sport being just a light, playful thing, you know? You get to just enjoy the ride a lot more on those dual sports as opposed to just having to you have to think more on an ADV bike. It's the same on top shelf bikes and bottom shelf bikes in these categories. You really do need to approach riding differently when you're on an ADV bike, because these things are big and heavy and pretty ponderous, even in the best of circumstances.
Yeah, I liked how stable it was, but when you hop on this, it suddenly feels like I'm not riding anything. Like it just feels like a broomstick compared to that one.
Yeah, it literally is like hopping on a bicycle.
With this, I definitely have to like, there's more finesse with the gearing and taking a corner. I'm like, okay, how do I want this to feel? Where that would just do it. And it's such a big difference going from bike to bike that I was really lugging it through corners on the KLR, but this one, it's way easier.
Yeah, I'd say that is a little bit more normal of a bike, because unlike on modern motorcycles like we were comparing last week, the KLR really is just an ancient motorcycle.
Is that why you bought it? Because it was a relic?
Yeah, it basically is. Even though this has got all the fancy new plastics, it's real old. Like we were saying earlier, it's largely a 1987 motorcycle.
Oh, I didn't know that. I came into this totally blind about the KLR. You know, Mom and Dad being you and Yam, you guys are very polar on it, so I'm just like in the middle.
Yeah, this motorcycle, the engine was built in 1987 and has gone through like some very subtle changes throughout the years, but it's basically been built the same forever.
I feel way more confident taking these hairpin turns on the CRF, but then again, I just hopped on the KLR for the first time, so I could see my brain melding to that, you know, KLR lifestyle, because it was also really stable and it took turns really well. It was just me that needed to acclimate to it.
Yeah, I did throw you into the deep end a bit, but between these two motorcycles, which would you rather have as a twisty road motorcycle?
Oh, the CRF.
CRF?
Yeah.
Yeah, if I was hitting solely twisty roads and dirt, I definitely would choose the CRF. Because it's so much more light, it's so much more playful. It is a better motorcycle on the twisties, and I'm comfortable admitting that. I'm sorry, KLR. You're just not, you're a little too fat for the twisty roads.
Yeah, and this bike just wants to have fun. That bike wants to make sure you get there safely.
Yeah, it has some dad energy, that's for sure. But Now is where things get a little interesting, because we are going to hop over to my little dirt loop and we're going to throw both of these motorcycles up against each other in the dirt. Let's see how it goes. And just like that, through the power of editing, we are out here in the dirt, or road, as some of you might want to call it. This is the best little dirt loop that we have around here. It's where I like to go take a lot of bikes. You've seen it a few times now. And I brought Whitney out here to render an opinion on riding a cheapo ADV bike versus a cheapo dual sport. And how you feeling over there on the big pig?
You always ask me when I'm going through my first corner. I'm like, wait, he's asking me a question. Buffering. This thing I gotta not swear, but it makes me want to swear. This thing absolutely crushes it. And not gonna lie, as a more timid rider and a newbie, I think this is like, I don't know, my 4th time out on dirt. This thing rips. This thing crushes it.
Yeah, that's the thing that I love so much about the KLR and big ADV bikes generally, is how confidence inspiring they are.
Yeah, I was super worried after going through here with the CRF, and I like ate a tree, and then I got on this and I was like, I don't want to drop Jake's bike. Like, I'll pay for it, whatever, but I got on this and I was like, holy shit, I love this bike.
Yeah, it's really easy to ride because it just stomps on top of everything. That's the best part about the KLR, in my opinion, is how just it'll putter over whatever you point it at. And now to render, my thoughts on the CRF, it's really it's got a lot going for it. The problem is, and you were mentioning this earlier, is that the front end likes to dance a lot.
Oh yeah.
So let's pull over here and swap bikes really fast.
No!
And let's see what you think going back and forth, because the little CRF is a lot lighter, and so you'd think it'd be a lot easier to manage, but yeah, I'm really interested to see what you think now getting back on the really little light bike.
Yeah, I honestly don't want to, but I'm not a dirt bike rider, so people who ride dirt or grew up riding dirt, they're like, what are you talking about? You move around, that's what you do. And I'm like, yeah, I ride leader bikes on the highway, so I don't do that.
All right, let's see what you think going through here.
Also, Spite, thank you for giving me a mini Dakar. Like, so much easier standing up.
Yeah, no problem.
When I crashed on this into the tree, I was sitting down and I was like, dude, this sucks. And then I started standing and I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it way wrong.
So how's the gearbox feel to you? I think that's off-road one of the biggest differences between these motorcycles, aside from the weight.
The gearbox is different. The CRF definitely has more lurch and bitiness to the throttle, and I could see if you're like me and you're a novice, that can be distracting. But I can also see how it could get you out of like a rough situation,
Yeah. How's it feel now that we're going to start going over some of these rocks, and both Yam and I have noticed that the rear end is a little easy to unsettle on that bike. How are you feeling compared to the weight?
Let's see. It makes it so I can feel every single fucking bump and bite and rock. And like I said, as a novice, that's really distracting.
Yeah, it's a little bit harder to just put that bike online. I'm noticing just following behind you.
How I just picked the worst line of my life right there.
Yeah, you're struggling more to keep that bike online, which actually is surprising to me. I would have thought it would be the other way around.
Well, I don't know. I feel like a heavier bike stays planted.
Yeah, it really does.
A heavier bike is more trusting, where this, I'm like, I feel like I gotta have a little bit more experience to be able to just rip it, you know?
Yeah, although you were going pretty quick through there. That was definitely one of your faster journeys through. But now that you've done both bikes, my pick is for the KLR simply because of how just it trundles over stuff. How about you? What do you think?
Dude, KLR all fucking day. It's hard to say because, like, as a female rider with being on a dirt bike 4 times, I would pick that, but if I was alone, I would want something that would be a little bit easier to pick up.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you pick the bike that makes you uncomfortable and it's more challenging so you learn quicker? Or do you pick the one that just is more fun?
Yeah, there's a lot more difference between these two motorcycles than I originally thought. You know, obviously I was thinking this was just going to be too heavy. It was going to be a little bit unwieldy through here for you as it's your first time out here on it. But I'm actually really surprised how much more comfortable you looked on this bike.
Yeah, this one, I like pushing my limits, and I was pushing my comfort on the CRF, and I thought the opposite. I was like, don't want to dent don't want to dent Spite's new bike. This is a giveaway bike, but I mean, it can take it.
Yeah.
I mean, they both can take it, but this is just easier to flick out of a tree. But the KLR all day, I'm surprised.
Yeah, me too.
I'm surprised.
Well, guys, with that being said, it looks like it's 1-to-1 KLR and CRF. I do think that as a Twisty Road bike, the CRF wins, and as a dirt bike, a shocking come-from-behind victory for the KLR here. Now, I think this is the last one, and I think it's weighted in the KLR's favor. This is the highway ride. So let's get these bikes back to the shop via the highway, and let's start wrapping this video up.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, so we are pulling onto the highway here, which is certainly the Achilles heel of both of these motorcycles. However, personally, I think that the KLR wins out. How about you, Whitney?
I mean, I knew that the moment we pulled onto the road.
Yeah, the thing about the KLR on the highway is, no, it's not fast, absolutely, but it's fast enough, and it's also heavy enough that it's stable. Right now, I'm feeling every little breeze going over the handlebars on this bike. And yeah, the TKC80s are handling it well. Like, the TKC80s themselves aren't causing the front end to wander, but the wind is really not helping on this bike.
Yeah, riding that up here, I was not having fun.
Yeah, it's really easy for a ride on this bike to go sideways with the wind. We were talking about how yesterday I was riding in on the Pan America at like 20 degrees of lean all day because of the breeze. If you have more than like 15 or 20 mile an hour crosswind, this bike becomes actually sort of unsafe to ride at highway speed. You really got to bring it down because it's so light side to side. So while that's great on the twisty roads, and it does help for some folks off-road, I don't know, the highway really kind of sucks. But how are you feeling about power on the KLR back there?
I don't know. I mean, it's just like we're cruising. I don't know if there's any lack of power. I mean, sure, getting up to speed isn't as quick as my other motorcycles, but not enough for me to dock a point.
Yeah, meanwhile here we're going up this like super easy going grade, and I'm in 6th gear full throttle right now. If I want to speed up, I have to go down to 5th gear, and then I'm still at full throttle, but I am picking up the pace a little bit. This 286cc Thumper, despite how much lighter this bike is, it's not enough to compensate for the lack of power on the highway.
No, and we went up a really steep highway hill on the way out here.
Yeah, you don't really get that on the KLR. Yeah, super steep hills, it starts to feel like it's not going anywhere, like it'll hold the same speed, but it never, you don't watch the speedo go down, which is a nice thing on a bike when you're on the highway. You don't want to watch the speedometer go down as you're adding throttle. Yeah, a short stint on the highway, this works, but anything more than that short jaunt, you're really going to want to address your route, which is why I chose the KLR over Dual Sport, because it can just putter down the highway.
And I feel like your stature, like this bike is just gonna, like if you're a tall guy, I feel like this bike is gonna be way more fun for you.
Does it feel too big for you when you're sitting on the highway, or does it feel like just a normal sized bike?
No, it feels like a normal sized bike. I was worried about that just because you were kind of making it seem like it was gonna be a lot, but once you're on it, it feels comfortable.
Alrighty guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this look at two cheapskate options, the part 2 to our flagship ADV and Dual Sport video, looking at the bottom dollar basic bike entry level stuff. If you did enjoy that look, do go check out our ADV bike versus Dual Sport, our flagship episode, because that was kind of cool. And it had some different elements to it. Yeah, we came to some similar conclusions, but there's a lot more nuance in those motorcycles, especially considering that the Pan Am was $25,000 almost as tested.
Woo!
So, with all that being said, remember, if you want to get entered to win this CRF, click the link down in the description below. Check out shop.yammynoob.co and yammynoob.co. Get yourself signed up to win. On the shop, every dollar you spend is an entry to win, and you can get yourself some cool merch, get yourself some riding gear, bags like what you see here on this motorcycle, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Keep watching Amy Noob!